Tier lists are a common feature of the watch community. We do a lot of them and they're all execrable. They're all awful. Nico's are embarrassingly bad. Adrian just did one recently and it was cringeworthy. But before anyone thinks I'm attacking Nico or Adrian, the truth is that all watch tier lists are absolute shit. And we are dumber after watching them than we were before we started. And to be clear again, if I did one and I put a lot of effort into it, I really researched it, it would be awful. I'll tell you why after the intro. Hi, I'm Pete McConville and welcome to my channel. I'm no one special. I just like to overthink, overanalyze and geek out on watches. If that's something you enjoy doing, then stick with me and we'll see how we go. What I want to talk today about is why all watch tier lists suck. It could be, in theory, possible to make a decent one. I've never seen one. I've never even tried to make one because I don't think it can be done. And today I want to talk about the 4 reasons why all tier lists suck and the one use they actually have. So let's buckle in. Tier lists are a huge thing in one of my other hobbies, which is gaming. And in gaming, they kind of make sense. They're still problematic, but they kind of make sense because the tier list is always tied to what we're going to call the meta. The meta is the rule set and the mechanics of a game at any one point in time that rewards or punishes particular game styles, particular ways of doing business, particular characters, weapons, that sort of thing. So you're able to test a weapon or a play style or a mod or a character against known mechanics and then test and come out and say this gun is better than that gun because the meta rewards it. This healer is better than that healer because the meta rewards it. And you can put numbers to it. This gun or this person or this build will create more damage, will do more healing, will take more hits. And you can come up with a sensible tier list. That idea of meta is super important to the idea of can you do a decent watch tier list? And the truth is, we start with the idea of, no, you can't do a decent tier list because there's no meta. There's no, or if there is, it's totally uncertain and it's always shifting and no one can describe it. What I mean by that is, in a game, you can describe what's good. It does more damage or it doesn't. It's very simple and straightforward. But what's the meta? What's the test? What's the measuring stick? What's the criteria you're using to measure a brand? Is it novelty or is it predictability? Is it commercial success? And if it's commercial success, is it gross commercial success? Who's selling the most? Or is it who's rising, who's falling? Or is it return on investment? Or is it value for money? Or is it status? Is it accessibility? Or is it wait lists? What is the basis that we're using to test whether a brand is good or bad? If you watch anyone who does a tier list, particularly like Adrian's last one, you can see the confusion in his own face when he really realizes he wants to put watches in certain places and he can't think of why he wants to put it there. And that's because he really doesn't know what his meta is. He doesn't know what his criteria is. The next issue you run into is the idea of an uncertain sample. And what I mean by that is when I'm looking at a gun or a player in a game, I know what I'm looking at. I'm looking at that gun being used to shoot things. And that gun is nice and solid and round and certain. I know exactly what it is. But what is a brand? And that sounds like a silly question, but what I mean by that is the brand based on all the watches, just some of the watches, the most popular watches, the watches aimed for enthusiasts, the ones that have the most variety, etc., etc. Take Rolex, for example. Most people, when they're assessing Rolex, will say one of the powers of Rolex is that it's such a straightforward brand. There's no confusion. There's not a lot of skews. There's a really tight idea of what the catalog is. And that is true if you confine yourself to one section of the brand. If you confine yourself to the professional area and look at subs, you can look at this and see, yeah, there are something like 12, I think, in total varieties of sub. That's not including bracelet choices and so forth. So that's just watch head variations, dials, bezels, cases, that sort of thing. But jump across and go to the Datejust. Now let's just go to just the Datejust 31. So not all the sizes, it comes in 3 sizes, but just the Datejust 31. Disregarding bracelet choices, how many SKUs, pick a number in your head right now, how many independent SKUs, bezel choices, dial choices, materials, that sort of thing, do you think you have in the Datejust 31? Give you a hint, it's over 2,300. That is 2,300 SKUs in one size of one watch. Then when we turn around and say, Rolex has a really tight catalog, Rolex doesn't have too many SKUs, what are we talking about? What is going through our minds? Because we're clearly wrong if you are looking at Datejusts. So when you're thinking about Rolex or Omega or Breitling or Tudor, most people, when they're doing these tier lists, don't seem to know what brand they're talking about. And what I mean by that is they don't understand, or they haven't really thought about, what is the part of the brand which I'm going to include in my assessment of what's good or bad and where they fit. The next issue with having this sort of tier list is in gaming, and anyone who's developing a tier list, it implies that you have a deep understanding of all the things that you're putting on that list. That if you're ranking guns or knives or play styles or characters, you've played all of those, you know how to get the best out of them, you know what you're doing to really achieve everything you can do with whatever it is that you're assessing. And that is patently untrue of every watch YouTuber that ever does a tier list. Yes, there are parts of that list they understand really well, but then there are parts of the list that they barely look at. They're perfectly happy making pronouncements about a watch brand where they probably can't name more than 1 or 2 of the watches that they make. They have probably not engaged with any of the media around that watch. They probably don't engage with any of the community that is into that watch. And so really, it's like, how do you rank something you know nothing about? And then you get to the idea, and again, I'm going to come back to gaming and talk about the problem of any tier list is fluctuating metas. What happens with games is game developers are constantly tweaking them. Every patch that comes out, there's a slight twist on the mechanics or weightings that are given to something or power factors. And so a gun that might be super powerful for one patch gets nerfed for the next, etc., etc. So you've got to be, if you're doing a tier list, you've got to be right up to date with what is the current meta, what is hot now, and also what is the gun, the rifle, the character doing today. And again, this really comes back to a sort of another version of the uneven knowledge. Most of the YouTubers you watch actually consume very little watch media. They actually make a point of pride of it. A lot of them will tell you openly, I don't really consume a lot of watch media. I don't want to find myself following trends. And that's noble, of course, great, fantastic. But if you're not following what's happening in the world, who the hell are you to try and judge someone against what's happening in the world? You don't know. You don't know if a brand is on an upswing or a downswing. You're just making shit up. Okay, so bring that all back. What we have is videos being done on a topic where people are unsure of what the criteria is they're using for the test. They're unsure of exactly what brand it is that or what part of a brand that they're testing against, whatever their measuring stick is anyway. They don't know much, if anything, about vast swathes of what they're going to be talking about and putting up on the screen. And there's no guarantee that what they're talking about is in any way current or up to date or reflects you or today or tomorrow or your region or anything like that. So really, what is this video any good for? You're probably going to be dumber after watching it than you were before watching it. And I think there is a use for them. They are kind of helpful, because what do you call something what do you call an expression when someone has no idea what they're talking about, no interest in being right, no interest in researching it, and don't really work through their ideas? That's called a prejudice. And ultimately, that's what these tier lists show us. They show us the prejudices of the people throwing the tier list together and then coming out and telling you. When someone comes out and says this watch is S tier, or this watch needs work or whatever, or this brand does, what they're telling you is nothing about the brand, but everything about how they see the brand. And that's kind of helpful, because you can take that and then put it against everything else they do. If they put a watch up at the top, then you can be pretty certain that they're not going to think too much about it, that whatever's going to come is going to be positive. If they put a watch down the bottom, you can be pretty confident that they're not going to think too much about anything that they actually say about that brand, and it's probably going to be negative because they've already decided that they're negative on that brand. That's kind of useful to know. And I think that is the one use of a tier list. The one benefit that it has is you sort of race to the end, grab the screenshot, save that somewhere, and then use that as a test, as a filter for every other review this person does. So anyway, I've been Pete McConville. This is my rant for the day. I will see you later. Bye.